to get going today and let the record show. I think we have more in the Ag Committee. We did appropriations this morning, so that's good. We've had a good week in Ag. Your chairman's on his full, no, I won't go there. He's fine. It was a good day. The agribusiness folks are here, and some are even here today. We had the opportunity to share some thoughts on agriculture in Kansas with them at lunch today. So glad you all are here and others. So we had to cancel the update on the federal and state program to plug abandoned oil and gas wells. He fell ill, I believe, and so we'll reschedule that for another time. So with that, we will go in. This is not a hearing, but what this is an open discussion of a couple of folks that were invited to give us an update, and then we will go into working House Bill 2168, which we did have a full hearing on, but it was the end of last year and no action was taken. So with that, we will kind of refresh like we do with hearings. So I will call upon Kyle Hamilton to kind of review House Bill 2168. You know what? That's a great idea since this isn't a formal hearing. Is anyone here for bill requests? Are we ready or not? Are we done? Okay. Any other bill requests? Do you have one? Oh, okay. Well, you never know. All right. We still have opportunities, so watch your calendar because the chairman sometimes gets his days confused on when and what deadlines are. So I think the agenda will be changing, and we'll talk about that at the end of the meeting. So anyway, with that, no bill introduction. So Kyle Hamilton from the Revisor's Office, again, a revisit of House Bill 2168.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So yes, we last had a hearing on this bill last March 15th, 2023. So quickly, I'm just going to go back through my brief that I read that day, and then we'll be getting some updates from other conferees. So House Bill 2168 starts with a brand new section that would expressly allow the manufacture, transportation, importation, sale, and storage of any commercial feeding stuffs that include hemp fiber, grain, or seed. The exception for that is if any of the hemp materials are determined by the Secretary of Agriculture to be misbranded or adulterated, contain or possibly contain any substance injurious to public health or the health of livestock, poultry, or pets, or 3, be sold, offered, or exposed for sale in violation of any of the statutes contained in the Kansas Commercial Feeding Stuffs Law. Section 2 would amend the definition section of the Kansas Commercial Industrial Hemp Act to create a definition for hemp fiber, grain, or seeds. Section 3, which is on page 4, line 1, would allow for the use of performance-based sampling when inspections are conducted, which does not require each lot to be sampled and tested. Additionally, Section 3, page 5, line 28, would set the Act's licensing period to at least 2 years and cap the licensing fee for such period at $500. So it would be $500 for every 2-year period. Section 4 on page 6, line 1, would make a similar change to individuals who are registered as hemp processors. We were talking about producers, now we're talking about the processors. They're regulated by the state fire marshal. The bill would set their registration periods from 1 year to 2 years at a fee not to exceed $500. Under current law, a hemp processor who engages in the extraction of cannabinoids from industrial hemp must be fingerprinted and subject to a state and national criminal history record check. Section 4 would require that the state fire marshal grant an exemption to such requirement for processors who only manufacture hemp products that are derived from hemp fiber, grain, or seeds, which from what I understand wouldn't contain the THC. Section 5 amends the current list of prohibited hemp products to remove references to products intended for animal consumption. So that's in conformity with the changes from new Section 1. Section 6 would amend the definition of grain to now include hemp grain. The bill would become effective upon publication in the statute book. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Seeing none, thank you. Okay. If that recalls your memory from March of last year, we have invited a couple that are involved in the industry to kind of give an update on where we are with hemp in Kansas. Did you flip a coin? Who wants to go first? Okay. So we will, and again, this is not a rehearing. I don't want to go through line by line of the bill at this juncture. You all were asked to kind of give a kind of where things are with hemp in Kansas. So first to Kelly Ripple, who is the president of Kansas for Hemp. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you very much, Chairman Rajes and Vice Chair Mosier, correct? You're still the Vice Chair? Okay. Committee members, thank you very much for having us here today to talk about hemp. We are kind of at a very crucial time in our state's hemp program, as are other states with their hemp programs, as we'll see and talk about. So before you have a couple different documents, and one of them is, it's got a little graph in the up-hand corner. And no one in the audience can see this, but it's just a real short, small graph about hemp acres nationwide and what those trends may look like. And just for the screen, yeah, you can't really see it, but there is a spike over the years of 2018, 2019, 20. Things really went up and then they went down. But as we've seen over time, and what other states have seen, is that there is an increase in acreage, primarily in the fiber and grain varieties. So we'll get to that here in a few moments. What I just want to say first and foremost is these trends that you're going to see demonstrate not only growing demands for hemp products, and also a transition to traditionally row crop farmers for fiber and grain, but we're also talking about a need to eliminate restrictions and increase the supports for farmers who are wanting to adopt hemp. And even as this is a value add rotation crop. Farmers just want to be able to get in. And as a certified crop adjuster, my job involves talking with farmers daily. And I've heard from farmers who often bring up hemp, and gosh, I wish things were kind of easier to get into. Other ground where we see other crops like soybeans or other commodities not really growing all that well. They want to try something new, but they just wish there wasn't as much red tape. So there is a need, and I kind of go back to the Midwest nicety. We don't like to really rock the boat, and so I know a lot of folks are out there who are wanting this and wanting change to happen, but maybe are a little scared to speak up about it. That first graph is showing the number of growers from 2019, which was 213. In 2023, that had decreased to 40. So I think that shows, both the trends of, like I had previously mentioned, the rise and fall of the CBD floral type varieties. That's mainly what farmers grew for. We've talked about that in years past. But as you'll notice in the comments of that same table there, 64% of those licensed were fiber, grain, or seed. So I mean, we're talking about an increase in other ways, and that's demonstrated by that next graph. Talking about the planted and harvested acres, in 2021, they had sunk down to 501 planted acres, 260 harvested acres, and that grew in 2022 to 842 planted, 523 harvested, and then in 2023, 814 planted, 652 harvested. So we're seeing a trend of growing adoption of acres and transition of acres to fiber and grain. And of course, what we're going to talk about with AFCO doing an approval for hemp feed with dog seed. I'm sorry, with hemp seed for hemp feed. This is going to just open up markets, and that is in addition to fiber and all of these other sectors that hemp contributes to as well. The next group of data comes from the national data set, and this was gathered by the Kansas Department of Agriculture. But I think it's important to point out that Kansas really, we're ranked up there. We're ranked about in the middle right now as far as 2023 acres go for hemp growing in our state. There are others that have had a head start. They've been doing this longer. But primarily Kansas, as we know, is an ag state. And so we've got the acreage to do it. We have the expertise to do it. And so we anticipate that in the coming years, not only will there be larger adoption, but I think we will kind of increase in the rankings for other states too. We've got a long way to go. Like I said, even just as a rotation crop. And again, you'll also notice I highlighted the increase of fiber and grain acreage over time. Now, if we look at the entire hemp market, it depends on who you ask, where your sources are. But overall, there is a large confident consensus that hemp will increase exponentially over time. This includes all of the construction material that is being made with hemp now, approval for hemp in certain ingredients for animal feed and human consumption, and all of the other sectors that we've talked about in previous meetings in previous years. So, like again, depending on who your source is, you may be looking at an increase of $16.2 billion market by 2033, or a 1.8 billion total worldwide by the end of last year. I mean, there's just a number of sources that you can look at, and a number of criteria and parameters that they use to evaluate these markets and where they're going to lead to. But I can tell you that there's a lot of confidence in this right now, both at the state, national, and international level. And that leaves us really with some things that we've tried to do in the past here at the state to try to remove some of the red tape for farmers. And we got some information before this meeting, and I'm really pleased that the department came through on this, the Kansas Department of Ag. We had submitted a CORA request to obtain information about licenses. What other state hemp programs are charging for their license fees to be able to grow hemp? And we have this information. You have a copy of it. Unfortunately, it is in black and white, or in your case, grayscale. So you're not going to be able to quite tell what I'm going to be pointing out to you, but you will see the overall data. And by this, I mean, I have categorized each of these states and their level of license fees based on where they compare with Kansas. And right now, there are only 2 states, roughly, that have the license fee that Kansas farmers are paying, which is about $1,200 for a fee. The other states, and I'll just show this to you so you can see, the other states are orange and yellow. Those are roughly about the same, a little bit lower, maybe in the 500 range or below that. The green states are the ones that have really friendly fees for their farmers. And ultimately the darkest green are the states that don't have any fee at all. And they're treating hemp like just another crop. And primarily because their programs are through the USDA. They've sent their hemp program back to USDA, and so it's being treated like all other crops. Farmers just report their information to FSA like they do every year, and there is no fee for them to participate. I will say also at the federal level, there's movement this year there was last year and this year, to get an amendment through on the next farm bill that would exempt fiber and grain producers from needing to go through an FBI background check. And so that's something that we may look for in the future. And of course, if we were to do something like send our program to USDA, that would be automatic for our farmers. But anyway, I want to ask Sarah to come up now. She's going to talk about some other aspects. And I'm here for questions and to provide any other information that that I can provide. So thank you again for having us today.
Right, thanks. Just hang on here just
Yeah.
a second. You gave us a lot of information, and so I'd like if anybody has questions for you, and then we'll bring Sarah. Is that okay? Okay. So Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just as, yeah, you did give us a lot of information. I was looking down here on this chart, and I see, for example, and I haven't had a chance to study it, but it says Iowa does $500 plus 5 per acre, and some other plus features in Iowa. Maybe in some of the others, they do an application fee, a license fee plus whatever per acre. And so I have not been able to total those up in my head as we talk. But as we look at a state such as Iowa, since I brought that one up, do we know the success rate of growing in Iowa compared to what we're experiencing here? I mean, maybe they're years ahead of us. We're kind of new at this. I know it takes a while to get things going. This has been an experiment here, and people have struggled. But can you compare their success rate with ours or anything like that to show me why, and also compare their rate of fees?
I can tell you, just based on, and of course I can follow up with more information on that particular question, but what I can tell you based on the information that the Department of Ag has provided here on the second page is Iowa is not listed on the top 10 states. Your list, no, I'm sorry. In the other handout that I provided, there are 10 states. Kansas is ranked 6th, and Iowa is not on. No, Iowa is not listed on that.
Okay,
graph.
I apologize, but I just
Yeah.
looked down and looked at the fee structure, and that one stuck out at me because it has a $500 fee plus a plus on it. So I don't know, if I was growing 1,000 acres, would it cost me the same as in Kansas? I can't tell that from this piece, and I don't know if they're in the top 10. I hadn't even found that page yet. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, not a problem. And it does depend. It would definitely depend on, in Iowa, how many acres you're growing based on the formula that they have at the state level, yes.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Looking at the grower license that are declining, just what do you attribute that to, that have gone down from, if we look back to 2015, the acres, and that peaked in around 2019 or so, 2020, and then it's fell off, and then, of course, the number of licenses, we're down to 40. So what do you attribute that to in your opinion?
Yeah. So the main reason, or I guess there is a suite of reasons, but the main reason is because farmers predominantly grew the first 2 or 3 years for floral material. The majority of row crop farmers grew very high labor-intensive plants. And it didn't necessarily work out for a lot of folks because they didn't either know what they were doing, they didn't have folks who did, or the right equipment. I mean, there are a number of reasons, but the other part of this that I think is very important, 2019, it was an awful year to grow anything. I mean, that was a rough year. And so our starting out kind of had some rough footing to begin with just because of the natural conditions. But going back to the change of varieties that we have seen over time, just as Kansas farmers have transitioned to fiber and grain because that works better for the majority of their operations, other states are experiencing that as well.
Yeah, follow up on that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm assuming you're seeing from the central part of the state west as better growing conditions for hemp. I mean, I'm from the southeast. We technically get a lot of rainfall. We haven't in the last 2 years. We could have grown a lot of hemp based on rainfall, but is Kansas favorable? Is that a factor in the decline of licenses? People say, hey, I don't bang my head twice and it hurts.
So Kansas is extremely favorable to hemp. It grows wild in every corner of the state. Depending on the conditions, given precipitation and the climate of that year, like last year, we flip-flopped, right? Central and western got a lot more rain than the eastern part. But overall, we've seen, and the data has demonstrated, that hemp does grow well throughout the state. And I will also just mention that there is a group who is specializing in genetics that are bred here in Kansas for that exact purpose. And I think once we truly embrace what this crop is going to do agriculturally, we've got some extremely exciting things to be thinking and talking about.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your presentation. I have several questions here. One is this bill that we're considering here changes the definition here to grain for livestock and animal and poultry consumption. So now we know that the allowable upper limit for THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol, is 0.3%. And that was established when we approved products like cannabidiol or CBD, and most of the time that's consumed on a daily basis at less than a quarter of an ounce a day, and that appears to be quite safe. Now, if we change our definitions here and we allow that 0.3% in feed, maximum amount, but if you do the math here, if you four doses per ounce times 16 ounces would be 64 doses times a 100-pound animal eating grain will very commonly consume 3% of their body weight a day, which would be 3 pounds a day. And so now, if we've got 64 doses per pound times 3, we're looking at a 200-fold increase in daily dosing of maximum dosing for THC. Do we have any data to indicate that that's safe? We do know that in dogs, the most common cause of poisoning in dogs in this state is THC ingestion. And that's also been confirmed by the National Poison Control Center hotline for, so that, you know, this is a problem. Most of those products contain 10 or 12%, but they're also consumed in small quantities. So at what point do we need to be concerned about the safety of animals that are consuming this product on a much higher per daily dose than what products we've had in the past year?
It's a great question, and it's something that a lot of people are talking about right now. And I'll just say, as far as 2168 goes, I didn't create that bill. I didn't write that bill. So of course, it's open to amendment, I think, or depending on what the chair and rules allow. But as far as the data on toxicity in animals and livestock, I was on a call just the other day with the head of the Hemp Feed Coalition, who was at the AFCO meeting in Kentucky this week, approving hemp for laying hens. But what she said is that as far as the toxicity data that they've collected, it would you would basically have to eat over 25 pounds of steak in order to have any type of noticeable level of cannabinoids in your own metabolism. While a livestock eats something like ruminants of hemp or hemp biomass. So yeah, we can get you that information, we'll get you the data, but as far as what the research that K-State has done, they've demonstrated that if livestock eats hemp, which they do naturally in the field, I think that was mentioned last year, it causes them to not be as anxious and lie down more. And these are things that are beneficial and naturally important for animals and their digestion. So like, well, I'm happy to get you more information on that for sure, but I can't speak on behalf of the Department of Ag, but I can say as an appointed member of the Hemp Advisory Board that animal health is of utmost importance. It has to be. That's one of the reasons why we're doing this, because we want hemp to be a sustainable and nutritious source for our animals and for humans.
Okay, thank you very much. Along that vein of safety, we know that it's been shown repeatedly that if you run into difficulty in harvesting this product, and this plant is prone to be invaded by funguses that produce mycotoxins, and most specifically aflatoxins. And we know that aflatoxins are concentrated in milk. And so even though they may not be toxic to the animal producing the milk, they are concentrated in the milk. And so what safeguards do we have in place here to know what the aflatoxin content of this product is and the safety of our food supply?
That is another excellent question, and I would love for the Grain and Seed Association to be able to fully regulate their co-ops and their seed to be able to identify mycotoxins, because that's the case is right now they're not doing that, and we kind of need them to be able to do that, so processors can come online and be able to supply the chains with safe seed and other byproducts of hemp. There is a process, and again, a lot of people are talking about this as far as mycotoxin, but corn and soybeans also are prone to mycotoxins and aflatoxin and other. So yeah, there are ways of dealing with that for sure.
Can I ask one more question?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I want to make sure we stay on task.
Okay.
We're not here to
read.
rehear the bill again, okay?
I'm just asking. Yeah,
I know, but
In this same vein, we know that this plant is what is known as a hyperaccumulator. And so if this plant is grown on soil that has high concentrations or elevated concentrations of heavy metals, which would be like lead, arsenic, cadmium, or mercury, that plant accumulates those. And there have definitely been cases where animals have been harmed. And also on the first page here, on line 13, it mentions here that this could be imported. We know that there are a lot of places in the world where mining has left high levels of heavy metals in the soil. And what safeguards, I don't see anything in this bill, but what would be the mechanism for guarding our animal health and our food supply from contamination with mercury, lead, and arsenic?
So I would ask first, what are the roles and processes in place to guarantee that in other crops as well? Because that has to be a concern if we're also feeding other crops and grains to livestock. But yes, you are absolutely right. Hemp is a bioaccumulator. It's a phytoremediation tool. That's why it's used in places like Chernobyl and the Panasonic plant where there's contaminated soil. You know, these are options that farmers can use for stream bank stabilization and a lot of other reasons. But yes, its primary end use as far as feeding it or getting it into fiber, those are all very important questions, and that's why we actually have to regulate them so that we can institute and integrate OSHA standards and all of the things that other industries have enjoyed and rely upon in order for them to operate functionally. And when you mentioned that other countries are growing hemp and you know, maybe they're getting contaminated, that to me is an opportunity and a reason for us to regulate and support hemp farmers here in Kansas so that they can grow hemp here on our soil so that we can enjoy those economic benefits here domestically.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chair.
you. Just in reference for time, you'll be available for more questions.
Yes, for sure.
We also have Sarah Stevens, ask her, and she has been before this committee before with the Kansas Hemp Consortium as well, and kind of give us a few words, and then so we can make sure we don't. Like I say, I don't want to rehash the bill. I mean, you know, I want to just kind of get an update on kind of where we were. So yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate the chance to be here because it is, like Kelly said, an exciting time for agricultural hemp across the country. And I wanted to start, I'm on page 3 of this packet. It's kind of where Kelly left off, and some market updates I just wanted to call your attention to. Just came out the hemp imports from Canada each year, the United States' largest importer of hemp grain for human consumption. $55 million in 2023. And then the rest of our hemp imports are coming still from China on the textile side. That only totaled $2.2 million 2023. Again, textile imports hemp from China. The third bullet there is about a $10 million hemp protein facility that's owned by the Chinese government that's getting ready to open in North Carolina. And then just some general trends that I think are really exciting. In addition, today is just like could not be better and more epic timing on 1/24/24, but the hemp seed meal for laying hens announcement this morning from AFCO about the inclusion of hemp seed meal in their ingredient definitions. So we're not going to, the bill as it is before you today, you guys are going to work through that. And we have no illusions that you're going to approve hemp anything for cattle or other animals beyond what receives AFCO approval. And we've been talking with the KDA, and they actually would be able to adopt that in their regulations based on AFCO approval. It shouldn't really be something that has to weigh down progress on the bill today. There's still opportunity to move with licensing fees that can be more encouraging to producers. There's a little bit of research there in the packet about what other universities are doing around the country on hemp feed, and then also some incentives on the last 1 to 2 pages, different incentives that states are adopting to encourage the hemp industry, and I hope that that's what we can do here is see that this is a great opportunity for our state, for our producers, for our animals, and get about pursuing industrial hemp as a commodity in Kansas. You know, the policing of the crop is slowly fading in other places, and other places are actively pursuing this as an economic benefit to their state. And that's what we hope you'll be able to do. We appreciate the chance to talk to you, and I really appreciate you working the bill and hope to be available for questions.
Okay, I have a couple of them, and again, we brought up before Oklahoma had passed the House. Did that get signed into law?
They have, I think it is on page.
I'm saying, so states that approved hemp sealed as an ingredient, but what, page 4 or 5, whatever it is?
It's my understanding that in Oklahoma it is approved, but that the regulations that actually roll out to label something, those are not in place yet. So there isn't anyone actually packaging it up yet, but it's not illegal. It just hasn't rolled out, you know, through the scheme, the regulatory scheme.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because but I'm seeing in all these that had a bill, I'm not seeing anything that was signed into law. I see one house that passed it. I'm just trying to.
Well, I think that's just the bill number, but those are law. In Montana, that's the law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The incentives you talked about. Nine Fiber got a grant for Pueblo 2002 opening by a third year of operation would have been 2022. Is that still operational, do you know? Nine Fiber in Colorado?
I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
This was, we had been talking with the governor's office and just trying to find other ways to support the industry. And so they asked for that information on the incentives, and we started putting that together. It was a good little research exercise to see, but we didn't go back through and see.
Right, I mean, and I just, they were incentives, but did they, what, did it really come through with what they wanted? That was my curiosity, if you had that. Okay, other questions? Representative White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and please indulge me. I don't want to rehash this, but I guess I missed the memo. What are the fees that are collected?
Currently?
Yes, what are they used for?
Well, the Kansas hemp program under the Department of Ag is by statute a fee-funded program. So when there were 220 growers paying, it's about $1,500 per license. In those early years, there was a surplus, but now I believe, there's only 40 growers, so whatever that comes out to is not enough to sustain the budget, but it just supports them coming and doing their sampling and managing the hemp program, as far as I know. I mean, KDA would be better to answer that. Yeah, thank you.
Right, so, and I guess there's another question, I guess my last question was brought up with Mr. Ripple and so on. So have you talked about, as we move forward, based on whatever happens today and moving forward, for your group, would it be beneficial just to go back and have USDA? I'm trying to find out the focus. Is the focus, and by reducing the fees a couple $100, going to see this huge increase of growers? My guess is you'll see increase in growers this year because of all the snow we've received and the moisture since last May. Because if they've got a little subsoil moisture, I think they might be a little more optimistic. So I guess help us kind of find out the crux to really what the growers, I mean, I understand wanting opportunity, I understand all this, but, it seems like we do a lot of focus on fees, as probably rightly so, but,
Yeah. Long term, I think the trend will be for most states to transition to the USDA and for the hemp crop to be treated like traditional commodities where there's not duplicate reporting. It's just one FSA report. As an industry, we have been advocating for lower fees for several years, thinking, that was the way, and we're just kind of watching these I think we're up to 10 states now that have transitioned to USDA, and like Kelly mentioned, that's a 3-year license, and it's $25. So, as that rolls out, we're going to see those states, I would guess, start to make leaps and bounds in their acreage. That is probably going to be capped by $1,500 in fees when, in Missouri, next door, $25. Also, you can have unlimited acres. They don't have to be connected. Here, if you want to have another section, it has to be, I think, within a quarter mile, or you have to get a whole nother license. So.
all right, Representative Blacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In those states that have transitioned to USDA, is it only the feds employees, the enforcers, or is it just a paper license, or do they rely on their local Department of Ag personnel in each state?
Kelly
Could you
could maybe
elaborate on
say,
that?
but they do have USDA inspectors. So I think the onus is on the producer to work with the USDA inspector to have their field inspected each year.
And when you say that, I wonder, how many? I mean, when you look at a federal inspection covering 10 states, how many people are there? Is there an inspection at all? If they're only doing a license for once every 3 years, I kind of see some, and $25 isn't a whole lot of incentive to go out and do much. So I just wonder if you have an interval, how that's actually working or experience working in those states that might have it.
I'll just mention real quick, because I've gone through the program to get USDA certification to be a testing agent, just because I'm curious and to see what that would be like. Yeah, one of the concerns from some of the states is that there aren't enough USDA certified sampling agents in that region. However, I'm sure there are plenty here in Kansas who are willing to get that specific certification. It also seems like another opportunity, so.
Thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other questions? Representative Minix?
Excuse me. I'm sorry if I've missed this somewhere. Is there any federally subsidized crop insurance for hemp here in the United States for risk management?
Kelly's an expert on that all.
So there is crop insurance under the multi-peril program under the risk management agency. There are some limitations, I believe, still with the program. I haven't looked at the 2024 program, to be honest, because there were a few changes. But yes, the overall answer is yes, and they are wanting to develop that program too. The more insurers, the more farmers who get their hemp crop insured, the more data they will have, the more robust that program will be. But I think starting out, it is limited to, I believe, successfully growing for 2 years, and it's not allowed for new farmers or prevent plant.
So what type of disasters does that cover, and what would be my proven historical basis to begin with?
So your 2-year average, your 2-year APH for production would be what you need for that hemp crop, just to be able to say, yeah, successfully I have grown and harvested this crop for 2 years. And then as far as as an insured, you would be negotiating with your agent, but I as far as what your premium would be on that, but you're saying catastrophic coverage. I believe there is catastrophic coverage for the number of perils that are available for crop insurance.
Well, that's most things in crop insurance, but I'd have to grow the crop for 2 years to develop my APH, and then on the 3rd year I could be insured.
That is my understanding, yeah.
And if I lose a crop due to hail, I'm sure they'd cover that. If I lost a crop due to higher THC levels because I was late harvest or something like that,
wouldn't be a covered cause of loss. But just to say, and I know you probably already know this, but hail crop insurance is different than multi-peril that's subsidized by the federal government, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
All right. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few comments and questions. First of all, I just think that, reducing the fee will most likely result in quite a bit more revenue to the state and for this program, because I've talked to a lot of people in my area that would be interested in farming hemp, but it just, the fees on it right now are just so high that it really isn't hardly possible for people to do it, and having a reduction in fees, I think, would result in a lot more acres planted and result in more revenue for the program. As far as the crop insurance, it isn't really quite as necessary for hemp, I would say, as it is for traditional crops, because hemp doesn't require nearly as much water to grow as traditional crops do. And so, I mean, hail insurance may be necessary, but your traditional crop insurance for hemp isn't quite as necessary as it would be for like corn or something like that, because hemp just doesn't require nearly as much water to grow.
If I could add, and to Representative Carlin's point earlier on some of the states that do like a $5 per acre, I think that could be an option too, because if you do have to grow for 2 years, most people do want to kind of start small, because it's not an automatic success. I've seen very few people have 100% success their first year, but we're getting better and better. But to encourage people to try it on smaller acreage sections, right now, if you pay $1,500 for 1 acre or for 1,000, which nobody has 1,000, but it could not be such a big fee related to your per acre cost once we get to 1,000-acre sections. But right now, while people are trying to experiment and learn it, that could be a way to, maybe have the higher fee on somebody that did have a large section. But those of us, most people are learning 20, 40, 80, 100 acres at the most in a section.
Questions? Representative Blex?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of a comment. I left the bill hearings and stuff last year thinking this is a value-added situation that might be something great for farmers, and looks like another 1 year changes things a little bit, and I think that's still there, but I'm also seeing a decline in the number of licensees, and that kind of concerns me a little bit of why that's happening. And then we hear issues, there may be some potential toxicity to animals is another concern. We really don't know too much about that. It'd be nice to have maybe a little more data on that. I know we don't have a lot of data because it's relatively new. But the game has changed a little bit, at least in my mind, from when we done it last year, thinking it was just a feed, maybe something that we could put through cattle, and certainly on dry years it would have something. So just kind of a comment. I'm kind of thinking out loud. I'll be thinking about that tonight probably. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Representative, I did so good the first 2 weeks. Schlingensieben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, aside from cattle feed, I mean, the applications for fibers are very diverse, right? I mean, I mean, are we just talking feed here?
We're not. I have some samples of micronized hemp that goes in polymer composites with me today. I have hemp hurd for animal bedding and hempcrete building. I have a hemp mat in there that comes from Canada that is used for grow mat for growing microgreens. It has a lot of uses, and again, we would like to see AFCO changes like the hemp seed meal incorporated into the regs, but we really do understand that right now Kansas is not going to approve hemp seed meal for cattle. So, I hope we can still make progress on other areas because there are a lot of other opportunities.
The last call? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there's our informational update. That was a lot of information and a lot of update. So, okay, so with that, we will now move into action on House Bill 2168. Committee, what is your pleasure? Representative Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we pass out House Bill 2168.
It has been moved and seconded. What's that? Yep. I haven't done this in a year. That's right. Well, yes, thank you. It's like my 4-H days. We have discussion on the bill. That's right. I knew it. I'm going to jump ahead of myself. So with discussion, I will call upon myself. I have an amendment. So, I know. As I said, I'll figure this legislative thing out about April when we go on after first adjournment. So, Kyle and folks, if you would hand out this amendment. Thank you. And then once it is handed out, I will ask Kyle to give us a quick update on the change. Extra copies there, yes.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So typically, you guys are probably used to amendments where you see the underlying bill and then there are strikeouts or you see new language being added. This type of amendment is a substitute bill. So if it were approved, it would just completely take the place of the underlying bill. So you wouldn't see that old language all being changed. This substitute bill would essentially, it only retains two of the changes that had been made in the underlying bill, specifically dealing with fees. So starting on page 4, and I apologize if your copies aren't in color, they might not be. But on page 4, for the fees for the producers, that fee would still be limited. It could not exceed $500. And so, and that would still be annual. In the underlying bill, the other change that had been made was that it would be a 2-year licensing period. But for the substitute bill, that reverts back to each year being a licensing year. So it'd be not to exceed $500 per year for the producers. And then I pulled up the regulation for the producers, and their current regulatory license fee is $1,200. And in statute, they hadn't had a maximum limit. And then turning to the next page, on page 5, where we're talking about the processors who are regulated by the state fire marshal, again, their registration fees would be capped at $500. And in the current regulations for the state fire marshal, they have a tiered system. So right now, the licensing fee is $1,000 if you are extracting cannabinoids, and then it's $500 if you are a processor who's not doing extraction. So under this change in the substitute bill, it would just flat be capped at $500 per year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions to Representative Fairchild?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what all is being taken out of the original bill in this amendment?
An easier way maybe to think of it is just to throw out in your mind the bill that we had been talking about up until now. It's gone. And then we're just starting over with, these are just two amendatory sections. The one dealing with the regulation of the producers, and then the second dealing with the processors. But the changes that are being made in the substitute bill are two of the many changes that had been made in the previous bill, if that helps.
What remains is of everything that was in that bill, basically we did a gut and go. We had a new bill. All that remains is lowering the fees for licensure. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then I guess my question is just for you. What is the reasoning for doing this and for having, a simpler bill, or for not having as much in the bill?
Because I think as folks had discussed, in order to get industrial hemp moving forward, this was where the most agreement was for just this for now, and see if numbers come up. The other things had some controversy with it, and so this is one to try to help move the industry forward again.
So is this something that the industry or the proponents are supporting then? Are they in favor of your amendment, the people that spoke today?
I can't speak for them, but that's the bill. Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a fiscal note or revenue impact or something on this amendment?
Was there one before?
Yes, there was. 366,000 something.
The way I understand is, in talking with the Department of Agriculture, currently administers this program, the money that's in there is, they have enough to kind of run the program as is for 12, 18 months, 20 months possibly. And so there is some concern if numbers don't come up for licenses at whatever rate that is, then there'll be no money to run this program. It will run at a deficit. And so as far as, no, there is no fiscal note. This is probably after this year review and see if license numbers come up. And I guess I see this as a building block, yet again, this is kind of the, in my opinion, probably the third or fourth step in hemp. The first one a few years ago when we started with being able to do research. And then we grew where we did, and then with big numbers, drought, other factors, numbers went down. So this is almost, if you, I don't want to make it too simple, but it's almost a recalculation of saying, okay, talking with stakeholders, is this the situation that we can all pretty much agree on in helping, if this is one of the blocks in the way, is the licensing fee, then is that the key to get more growers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the history lesson also. Thank you.
Representative Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I address Kyle?
Sure, go ahead.
Kyle, on page 6, I just barely briefed it. Will individuals who are just producing like food grade hemp or clothing hemp, do they have to do the fingerprints and all that also in this?
It's still in there.
Or is it just individuals with oils?
Fingerprints remain, right?
So, well, the current processes would remain where you would get the fingerprints if you are a processor dealing, extracting the cannabinoids. But are you talking about people who are selling the end products or something different?
Just maybe the grower whose sole purpose is growing it for like clothing or rope or whatever.
So it's been a little while since I've read the original bill that we passed after the Farm Bill, but I'm fairly certain that's a requirement under the federal law that we have the producers submit to background record checks. One moment.
Still, yes.
There's only one license category for producers, and so everybody has to. And right now it's still under the.
Just for the record, to make sure everybody heard that, there's one process, one license, and so so they all fall into that. So yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to address Kyle, if that's possible. Looking at the gut and go, we have basically the Department of Secretary of Ag has a lot of control over importation, safety standards, livestock feeds, and all that, as I understand it, is gone. And now what will happen is the Department of Ag, with the Attorney General and the Governor, will submit a plan that we don't know what it is, but they'll submit a plan, Department of Agriculture, United States, in which they will, Kansas Department of Ag will monitor and regulate the commercial production of industrial hemp. Am I correct in my thinking there?
So that is all the original language that the legislature passed when it wanted to establish a state plan. So it's probably a little strange just reading that old language in the present day, but those are the actions that were taken years ago by the state to establish the current industrial hemp plan.
But if we gut and go what's here, then this becomes new again, right?
This is it.
So this old stuff that prevented some kind of a safety or importation is gone. So now we'll be voting on an amendment to approve a plan. We don't quite know what it is.
So one requirement that we have to abide by when making amendments to current law is that the bill is always going to show the entire statute in its entirety, all the old language that's not even being changed. And so just by having that old language present in the new bill doesn't make that requirement brand new again. This is still all old law except for what's being underlined and what's being stricken. So this substitute bill being passed, it will not result in a requirement for the KDA to resubmit a plan.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Probst.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to follow on this because I just want to make sure I understand. This is basically, with the exception of changing the fee, reverting back to current law. That's right. What was in this bill is gone. We're reverting to current law. So we're not really addressing any of the animal feed or expanding any of the markets, or the only thing we're doing in this is reducing the fee.
Correct.
Okay. I want to make, thank you.
Representative Jacobs.
And that clarifies some things. If I may address Kyle one more time. On page 4, sections F and G, would you expound on that, please? Maybe that's already current language.
Right, so that is all current law.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Very good. Representative Minix?
I have a question about, I guess it's actually pertaining to the original law. If someone's been convicted of felony in the last 10 years, they cannot be licensed as a grower or a processor. Is that correct?
Still in there.
And if they are found to be growing without a license or something, or as a processor, the first incidence is a Class A misdemeanor, and the second one is a felony, which would preclude them from ever being a processor again. I don't see similar language for that as the grower.
I would just have to double check the language. I know what you're referring to, but I can't just off the top of my head say yay or nay to that immediately, but I can circle back to you.
Thank you.
Representative Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would that language, as the previous representative had spoke of, would that be on page 6, section G? Would that be pertaining to that?
For the processor. It's page 7, section number 2.
That is one component of that states what unlawful activity would be for a processor, not a producer.
Representative Carlin?
If I'm reading that correctly, that's what happens if you are convicted of some violation now, after you're in business. That's a new misdemeanor or whatever it says. But the question was if 10 years ago you had a felony or within 10 years, right? So that would be outside of this piece. This says upon first conviction of violation of this subsection, a person shall be guilty of a Class A non-person misdemeanor. So that's what happens if you're in business and violate. But if you've already had a felony, that was your question, correct? For something else.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead.
Something slightly different. I was trying to point out if you'd had a felony within 10 years, you couldn't be either one. And I see where there's penalties in here for an operator if they become in violation or if they don't go get registered and try to process something. I'm not finding something about what the penalties would be if someone was growing this product without being registered.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Kyle.
So that language for the producers is on page 3, subsection E, paragraph 2. Yeah, sorry. A little rusty. I haven't reviewed all that old language in a little while.
Representative Schlangen-Stephen? Oh, you didn't? Just calling the question, okay. Anything else? Any other discussion? Seeing none? All those in, what's that? Are we ready to go? Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the substitute for House Bill 2168, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Representative Moser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we do emergency final action to pass this out of committee.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. All right, now with that, for final action on the House substitute for, the substitute for House Bill 2168, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Post same sign. As amended, yes, sorry, substitute, but you're right. Thank you, Representative Sywarn. Motion carries. Yes, do you want me to do? Yeah, absolutely. You bet. Okay, thank you, committee. Next time we do discussion and action, pack a lunch. So, all right. Anything for the good of the cause? I know there's lots of opportunities tonight for things. So, next scheduled meeting is before Monday, January 29th, but that may change. The calendar says, but I think it's going to be called the chair. So do not plan on having a meeting on Monday. We will come back. We will have a pretty full day Wednesday, Thursday of next week. So still have opportunity for bill introduction. So be probably called the chair. So no meeting on Monday. So anything else? Seeing none, we are adjourned.